Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan Viner.
And I'm Yochanan Viner.
In our top story, Israel is not only battling Hamas terrorists on the ground in Gaza, but is also having to fight in the diplomatic arena for the right to defend itself. Last week, the United Nations Security Council passed a non-binding resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu denounced the UN declaration, saying it addressed the needs of Hamas while ignoring Israel's security needs. Jerusalem has also reacted coldly to a ceasefire proposal endorsed by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, which has been described as completely capitulating to the demands of Hamas. Even Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas was fuming over the Kerry initiative. The PA boss accused Kerry of undermining the Egyptian ceasefire plan, supported by both Israel and the Palestinian Authority, but rejected by Hamas. Netanyahu is insisting that Gaza must be demilitarized and all terror tunnels demolished. The elaborate network of Hamas terror tunnels, stretching from Gaza into Israel, was designed to allow Hamas gunmen to infiltrate into Israeli villages and IDF bases along the border. Terrorists operating from the underground passageways have launched several deadly attacks against Israeli soldiers, but so far have been thwarted in their attempts to kidnap civilians.
A senior U.S. official has reportedly leaked to Channel 1 television in Israel a transcript of a telephone conversation between U.S. President Barack Obama and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, exposing the hostility that the American leader has toward the Jewish state. Obama is said to have told Netanyahu in no uncertain terms that he expects Israel to immediately implement a unilateral ceasefire and halt all military action against Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Obama said that Qatar and Turkey would negotiate with Hamas to stop the firing of rockets on Israel. When Netanyahu protested that the two countries are the biggest supporters of Hamas and that it is impossible to rely on them to be fair mediators, Obama fired back that he trusts Qatar and Turkey and that Israel is in no position to choose its mediators. The White House National Security Council has dismissed the leaked transcript as bogus and said that it bears no resemblance to reality. Prime Minister Netanyahu has also denied the Channel 1 report.
Hamas' supply of rockets and missiles has been dramatically reduced. Several thousand have already been fired at Israel, and in addition, the IDF has destroyed thousands more. Now the terror group is reaching out to North Korea for help. Britain's Telegraph news agency reported that Hamas is looking for ways to replenish its dwindling stocks of missiles and has been in contact with communist officials in Pyongyang. Security experts said North Korea is an obvious place to seek supplies because it already has close ties with a number of militant Islamist groups in the Middle East. Meanwhile, outgoing Israeli President Shimon Peres, one of the architects of the failed Oslo peace process, accused the Gulf state of Qatar of becoming the world's largest funder of terrorism because of its financial support for Hamas.
The Palestinian press news agency is reporting that dozens of Gaza residents have been arrested by Hamas authorities and charged with assisting Israel during Operation Protective Edge. After a short hearing, the alleged collaborators were then immediately executed. Unnamed Palestinian security sources say that some of the suspects were caught with weapons and cell phones that contained SIM cards from an Israeli company. And in a related story, Western journalists in Gaza are cowering after Hamas threatened news reporters who exposed the abuse of Gazan civilians by Hamas. Journalists have been bullied, had their equipment confiscated, and have been barred from sensitive sites, but they're too afraid to complain. Photographers who filmed Hamas gunmen firing rockets from civilian structures have had their cameras taken away.
Alert Israeli border police thwarted a terror attack last week at a checkpoint south of Jerusalem. An Arab driver who was acting suspiciously drew the attention of security personnel who asked to search his vehicle. As the driver accelerated in an attempt to flee, a policeman reached through the window and tried to turn off the ignition. The would-be terrorist continued to drive with the officer hanging out the window until the policeman pointed a gun at his head. The car was found to contain a large amount of explosives.
In the middle of Operation Protective Edge, the European Union and the United States extended their suspension of commercial airline flights to Israel from 24 to 48 hours. The action prompted a blistering attack from U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, who accused the Obama administration of launching an economic boycott of Israel. The Texas Republican said that he found it strange that the White House would endorse a ban on flights to Israel, while at the same time announced that it is giving millions of dollars in additional aid to Gaza. Cruz asserted that the financial assistance will eventually make its way to Hamas. Several European air carriers refused to participate in the ban. Both British Airways and the Italian national Alitalia airline had the courage of their convictions to keep flying to Israel as regularly scheduled.
Israel's military operation against Hamas terrorists in Gaza has caused anti-Semites around the world to come crawling out of the woodwork. In the southern Belgian city of Liège, a cafe owner hung a sign which read, "Dogs are allowed in this establishment, but not Jews." And a clothing shop in Antwerp said it had temporarily adopted a policy of not selling to Jews. In England, David Ward, a member of the British Parliament, was forced to apologize for a tweet saying that if he were in Gaza, he would fire rockets at Israel. 2 Israeli soccer clubs also experienced the viciousness of anti-Semitism. Maccabi Haifa players were attacked in France during a training match with Austria, and the Ashdod soccer team was attacked by more than 24 skinheads during a practice session in Poland. Police in Norway recommended the temporary closing of 2 Jewish museums for fear of attacks. And the French government appears to be impotent when it comes to stopping violent anti-Israel demonstrations. Thousands of pro-Palestinian demonstrators have staged numerous anti-Israel marches in Paris, ignoring a ban on protest. Jews in France have been attacked in the streets, and Jewish shops and synagogues have been damaged.
Despite all of the anti-Semitic incidents and negative press in the international media, Israel does have its friends. The Israel Allies Foundation has succeeded in garnering support for Israel from members of parliament around the world. The director of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus, Josh Reinstein, said that the elected members of government in 30 countries on 6 continents are standing firm for Israel. Reinstein described it as a demonstration of the full force of faith-based diplomacy.
Reuven Rivlin has been sworn in as Israel's 10th president. The ceremony was a low-key affair at the request of Rivlin, who cited Operation Protective Edge as the reason. After taking the presidential vow, the 74-year-old Rivlin made reference to the current conflict in Gaza. He said he had a clear message to Israel's enemies: "You have not overcome us, and you will not do so." He went on to say that Israel is not fighting against the Palestinian people, and we are not at war with Islam, but we are fighting against terrorism. The special session of the Knesset was attended by Prime Minister Netanyahu, MKs, and other dignitaries. Noticeably absent, however, were Arab members of Knesset who boycotted the ceremony in protest of the IDF operation in Gaza. Right-wing MKs were outraged with the Arab no-shows, saying it was cynical and hypocritical, and they accused them of preferring to encourage Hamas rather than take part in the presidential inauguration.
Muslim extremists are continuing their persecution of Christians in Iraq. The new jihadist rulers of Iraq's northern city of Mosul have completely destroyed several ancient tombs, including the burial place of the biblical prophet Jonah. Witnesses say that the Sunni militants ordered those near the tomb to leave and then planted explosives inside and outside of the shrine. The blast completely leveled the site. The demolition follows an earlier threat by Islamists to the remaining Christians in Mosul to convert to Islam or face death. The fanatical leaders of the terrorist Islamic State, formerly called ISIS, also ordered all girls and women in the city between the ages of 11 and 46 to undergo female genital mutilation. And in the areas of Syria that they've captured, the fighters have murdered and crucified at least 8 Christians for the so-called apostasy from Islam.
This week, Jews around the world will mark the fast day of Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av. Many tragedies have befallen the Jewish people on this day. It started during the time of Moses, when the children of Israel accepted the slanderous report of the 12 spies and were forbidden to enter the land of Israel. The first and second holy temples were also destroyed on Tisha B'Av. The Jewish people were expelled from Spain in 1492. The outbreak of World War I occurred, and the mass deportation of Jews from the Warsaw Ghetto took place in 1942. We at Israel Now News hope you will join us in praying that Israel's days of mourning will soon be turned into days of rejoicing.
And that concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here on our rooftop studio in a beautiful day in Jerusalem. My guest today is Yoav Sarek of Makor Rishon newspaper. Yoav, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Yoav, what led up to Operation Protective Edge?
As Israelis, we're suffering for several years from attacks from Gaza. It's not several, it's maybe more than that, but from time to time, actually we need to put an end to that because civilians are targeted all the time by rockets from Gaza, from Hamas, which is sovereign in Gaza, and we have no other choice but to get rid of this attacks.
You know, Hamas is a recognized terrorist organization all over the world. They have 10,000 rockets. They're shooting on our population. Why aren't we turning Gaza into a parking lot right now?
Because we don't want to do that, because there are millions of people in Gaza, and we cannot just make a massacre on a big civilian population, even though some of them are, of course, supporting Hamas, but some of them are living under its terror and have no other choice, actually. So we need to be very delicate and very cautious in the way we deal with this very problematic situation.
The Prime Minister says that we're using rockets to protect our civilians, whereas Hamas is using civilians to protect their rockets. Why isn't this message getting out to the international community where they're calling for restraint on both sides?
Oh, I think this is a very good question. I think your show is helping to give this message, and what Netanyahu said is also totally correct. They do it all the time. They put people on the rooftops in order that we will not collapse those buildings where rockets are underneath. And we do our best, and we have a big fight on the media.
The IDF has targeted over 1,000 locations with missile strikes, yet the death toll has been relatively very low on the side in Gaza. Are we just blowing up empty buildings, or are we actually getting the job done?
Look, the Israeli government sees a low death toll as an achievement of this operation, because we know that once we have a high toll of casualties, we will be not able to complete the mission because of international pressure. And also, we don't want a lot of casualties. We don't want people killed. That's not our aim. Our aim is life, not death. The other side is really willing to have a lot of casualties because it gives him a lot of credit in the international sympathy. And they don't care about the people being killed. We do.
Hamas has literally rained down on Israeli cities with hundreds and hundreds of very sophisticated missiles, yet the death toll has been almost negligible here in Israel. I mean, you can never say that totally, but it has been something astonishing. Do the people of Israel realize that the God of Israel is protecting them, or do they see this as just a huge success on the Iron Dome in the military?
Oh, that, you know, it depends on the way you look at things. People, of course, a lot of people who are believing people think this is a great something that God keeps Israel. But other people will say it's Iron Dome, and the third people will say it's Iron Dome which God gave us the wit to create.
Around the Middle East, it seems that everything's on fire. There's this caliphate now in Iraq that is pretty much taken over most of Iraq and half of Syria. There's the Muslim Brotherhood operating with impunity. There's Syria that is just slaughtering thousands of people a month. How does this Gaza operation affect the wider region?
I think it does weaken Hamas, which is already weakened because of the Egyptians, which have neglected it, and because they don't like what is happening also in Syria and in Iraq. I think we can keep, and that's the mission of the government of Israel and the people of Israel, to keep this area stable and different from everything which is going beyond us. And till now, we're doing it very nicely, and also keeping our the Jordanian kingdom, which is some sort of an ally, in the same condition.
You know, world leaders, including the President of the United States, are calling for restraint on both sides. Here in Israel, that seems like a joke. How do you get a vicious terrorist organization to operate restraint, especially if the President of America, which this terrorist organization is dedicated to destroying, is calling for it? Why do you think there's this misconnection by world leaders who think that there's some sort of way to restrain a terrorist organization and that there's some sort of moral equivalent between them and the democratic free state of Israel?
The problem is that we are strong, and we're the strong side and they're the weak side. And there is some sort of a moral equation which is doubtfully and very misconducted, but it means that if you're the weak, so you're the good guy. And because everybody knows Hamas is a bad guy, but he's the weak side, so it's confusing everyone, and it's very hard to be supportive of Israel in times when it is seen as the big boy.
There are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
I think you have a very important mission because of all the problem with international media, which shows Israel as the bad guy, and even when it's totally clear that's the other way around. Everybody who supports Israel and knows the truth should just spread the word.
Thank you for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
This is Jerusalem, Israel's capital city. It's an ancient and modern treasure that is beyond belief. There's a little bit of Israel in all of us. Come find the Israel in you.
Up next, shining light from Israel.
Hamas rejected an Egyptian proposal for a ceasefire with Israel on Tuesday, moments after the Israeli cabinet accepted the plan.
Our people in Gaza must come to the realization that such idiotic decision-making forces the Gaza Strip and its people to pay a very steep price in martyrs and, unfortunately, in blood shed in vain with no prospects for victory.
There's no question what's happening here. Israel just started their response a few days ago. Hamas has been doing this since 2005.
Their identity comes from being the violent resistance. Their actions are mostly about how do we get new and better missiles to launch them at Israel instead of saying, hey, let's try to figure out how we're going to help make your lives better.
Since Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005, 8,000 rockets have been fired from Gaza into Israel.
Instead of building the Palestinian people up, they have committed themselves to tearing Israel down.
I feel terrible for a Palestinian child who dies. If it's your father, your brother, your uncle who is firing those rockets into Israel, whose fault is it really?
Hamas was perfectly well aware what would happen if they started raining rockets into Israel. And they have a strategy designed to force Israel to kill their own civilians. so that the rest of the world will condemn them.
This is why they have formed human shields of the women, the children, the elderly, and the mujahideen. We are doing everything in our power to not hit buildings nearby. We want to make sure beforehand that there are no civilians in the vicinity.
We call on our Palestinian people to remain in their homes and disregard the demands to leave, however serious the threat may be.
Hamas is exploiting our concern for human life by hiding in Palestinian homes, schools and mosques, and using the basement of a hospital in Gaza as its headquarters.
It's the ultimate cowardness. They take civilians, they surround themselves with the civilians.
Why are they hiding in mosques? Is it religiously permissible in Islam to store weapons under a mosque? If someone wants to fight, why would they hide under a family?
Why do you in the Al-Qassam brigades hide among civilians? Why do you use people's homes? You should keep your hideouts away from people's homes.
The spokesman of Hamas going on Palestinian television, urging people to serve as human shields.
I believe this strategy is proving itself, and we, Hamas, call on our people to adopt this practice.
Hamas is targeting the supply lines of its own people. It is firing rockets and an electric part in Ashkelon, which is keeping the lights on for the citizens of Gaza.
Every day there's food and milk and fuel coming into Gaza, and the terrorist organizations attack that very crossing through which the trucks enter daily.
Let me be clear. Hamas is targeting the only crossing through which food, medicine, and other essentials enter Gaza.
What moves us is the whistling of bullets, the sound of bombs and missiles exploding for the sake of Allah. This is music to our ears. This is our anthem, our songs. We're not ready to die in defense of Hamas. We're not ready. We will not die.
Anywhere else, this would be a vacation by a lake. But this is the Sea of Galilee. The wonders of Israel are beyond belief. There's a little bit of Israel in all of us. Come find the Israel in you.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
The Israeli cities and communities which immediately surround the Gaza Strip desperately need our help. The people living in these areas suffer considerably from the constant threat of rocket fire produced by the conflict in Gaza.
We are here in Kfar Asa, which is just a few miles away from the border to the Gaza Strip. And yesterday evening at 8:20, a siren was ringing here in the village. And 10 seconds later, a rocket came down here into the village and was hitting here this art gallery. It's a place where normally at this time children would be taught. But thanks God, yesterday evening there were no children there, there was no teacher there, so nobody got injured.
The flying time of a rocket depends where it's launched from is approximately 20 seconds. So if the launch is picked up, we have anything from 0 to 20 seconds warning. Sometimes we have no warning, or we have a warning the same time as the explosion. Depends what size of missile, where it's fired from, and so on. Now, there is no way to protect ourselves against the rockets because the Iron Dome system, which is so effective for Ashkelon and Beersheba and Tel Aviv, needs about 15 seconds to activate from launch to hitting the missile. So it's effective from a longer range, not from the short range. So we have no protection besides to get our heads into a bomb shelter as quick as possible. And this is ultimately what happens.
What you see behind me is that we are putting a bomb shelter there which will serve a youth community here in the kibbutz Kfar Saba. And the weight of this bomb shelter is 16 tons, and it will provide approximately 16 people as safety when the sirens are going on. Right behind that hill where the truck is standing, maybe 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers from here is Gaza. So this is a community which is hit very often by Katyushas and by mortar attacks. So this bomb shelter will for sure save lives in the future.
The Israeli cities and communities which immediately surround the Gaza Strip desperately need our help. The people living in these areas suffer considerably from the constant threat of rocket fire produced by the conflict in Gaza. Over the past few weeks, the ICEJ has been able to provide several portable bomb shelters to much-needed areas of the affected region, and additional requests for assistance continue to come in on a daily basis. Some of the most critical needs are bomb shelters for day centers serving the disabled. Many of these centers cannot operate due to their inability to provide adequate protection from rocket attack to the people they care for. Bomb shelters are also needed for Bedouin communities in the south of Israel, which have little to no protection at all. There are also numerous needs for food and emergency assistance, such as hot meals for the elderly and disabled who are held captive in their homes, and activities for children who spend hours daily in bomb shelters due to the constant rocket fire. Please consider helping us to provide life-saving protection and much-needed assistance to the people living in these communities. Your donation of any size will help the ICEJ to bring a sense of security and hope to the children, youth, and elderly in these affected areas, and more importantly, it will help save lives.
I want to read something to you which I looked up for you, and it's a quote that was made by Martin Luther King many years ago. It says, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in time of challenge and controversy." That's when you judge your true friends, not when they sit in an armchair and we discuss over a glass of wine what to do. When we're in trouble, that's when you have friends. That's when you find your friends. Ganz auch auf Deutsch so.
Visit www.icej.tv to give your gift today.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan Viner.
And I'm Yochanan Viner, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.